But labour supply is a big issue globally. Organisations are being pushed to start to take more responsibility for what data and information and oversight they have about how labour is being supplied to them.
Don't conduct your analysis in isolation because data is so incredibly powerful.
Not defending just the tribe, but defending the organization.
Those creative people that you really want to keep empowered, keep excited, keep motivated, keep thinking.
A good experience pays dividends down the line.
Stereotypes tend to break down in proximity.
Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast about human resources, business, technology, and the workplace. My name is Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Hey everyone, welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm glad to be here with you today. Looking forward to a conversation about, of all things, we're talking about compliance and some of the intricacies around that, some of the new technology that's emerging to help support compliance. And I'm so excited to have Michael Cleavely here with me today to discuss this. Michael, welcome to the show.
Hey Ben, how are you?
I'm doing great. Glad you're here.
Hopefully you've had a good start to the new year and lots going on.
Absolutely. So you and I had a chance to actually meet in person to say hello back at the Unleash World Conference in Paris. And I was telling you there that I've seen all these incredible technologies, got a chance to be part of their startup competition. And I was really intrigued by what you and the team at CoComply are doing. So we're going to talk about some of that today and how that matters in the bigger context. But before we get to some of that good stuff, would you take a minute and tell the audience more about who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Michael Cleavely. I'm the founder of CoComply. I've been in contingent workforce solutions now for the best part of 25 years. I've touched on technology. And when I talk about contingent workforce, Ben, I'm referred to the kind of common contingent workforce we talk about, but also non-permanent workers across services, procurement as well. So across all the different categories. A very brief background on me, so don't bore the listeners to tears. I had a startup when I was in my early 20s. We were lucky we went for a fairly early exit to Manpower at that stage. I did a stint in technology, and then we started CoComply in the UK in 2018 and really got going in about 2020 to deal with some legislation in the UK called IR35 and helping organisations deal with these really complex worker classification regulations which were brought into the UK. And the change that was made at that time was that the responsibility for accurate classification used to be for the contractors themselves to submit their tax return to HMRC, and they moved that responsibility to the client. So all of a sudden the client had this big problem to deal with, and it's been super complex, and everyone stuck a plaster on it for a bit and then realised that they need to really deal with this seriously. So that's what we've been doing. And yeah, CoComply, to summarize, helps organizations classify, manage, and discover their contingent workforce beyond contingent, so across services procurement.
Perfect. So as I think I was talking to you before, one of the things that stuck out to me is, of all the things that I had a chance to touch in my work as an HR leader, compliance was the thing that I least loved, if I can put it that way. I just did not enjoy it. I had other things that really got me excited. And so I'm curious, because you've spent much of your career and your life focusing on this topic. Why compliance? Why has that drawn you in? And what sort of things about it appeal to you as a professional, as a practitioner, all those sorts of things?
Fantastic question. We didn't actually start out originally to deal with compliance. It evolved from there, and we spotted a big issue that organizations were having. We had colleagues and friends in different organizations that were saying what a big challenge this was, and it was becoming a bigger problem in the global press as well. I know it's been in the US and Germany and places like India, so it's a global issue. Things evolved for us, and I wouldn't say that I'm a compliance expert in terms of, I'm not a lawyer. I don't go and do all that side of things. I guess the best way to describe it is a solutions guy. So just found a problem. It was in my sort of world of contingent and contract work, and we set out to solve it. There are people in my business that know far more about the intricacies of compliance than I do globally, but it was just a case of solving a problem and using systems, processes, and expertise to do it.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit more, because you highlighted it earlier on in your intro about CoComply and what you do. Talk about the risk that exists from a compliance perspective when it comes to classifying or misclassifying contingent workers. You talked about some key things y'all do around like classifying, discovering, all of that. So talk about the common problem. Companies show up at your doorstep saying, hey, can you help with this? What is that challenge they're bringing to you?
First and foremost, organizations will come with two key problems. they're concerned about accurately classifying the workers that they know about. It's complex. You need to maintain classification status. There's all sorts of rules about how you communicate it. The tax implications are significant. You're talking 50 to 60%, if not more, of the engagement value if you're not doing it accurately. And that's in penalties and tax liabilities and things like that, and interest that all add up, as well as reputational damage. So that's a key problem. Organizations come to us and say, we've got these systems, they're a bit disparate, the information is a bit disparate, and we need to make sure that we're classifying these workers accurately and ongoing, and we have control over that. The second problem they come to us with is we actually don't know how many contractors we've got in the first place, right? So bit of a bigger problem. And the reason that problem exists is because organizations buy in services from different service providers, and there's historically been very little rigor and oversight from a compliance perspective around those services. So you might be buying IT services, finance services, marketing services, you name it. Anything that's a human-led service that's coming into your organization presents a compliance consideration from a holistic perspective. Now, a lot of these services will be absolutely fine. What we refer to as a contracted out service or a fully contracted service, a genuine B2B relationship under an MSA and a statement of works in place. The supplier has complete control of what they're delivering. There's key milestones in these services. And so the risk to the buying organization is much more commercial. So they'll just be looking at making sure that the supplier delivers as they're supposed to. But what you find is agreements change under the hood over time. And some of these agreements aren't right in the first place. So some of these agreements are sort of staff org, right? They're just augmenting current teams. They've got people on time and materials. They're doing day-to-day stuff. And they just almost accidentally come in under these services agreement. And so effectively, these workers from these organizations that may be permanent workers of the supplier, they might be contract workers of the supplier, they could have a lot of different statuses. They're all technically providing their services directly to your organization. The fact that there's a third party in the middle becomes a bit of an irrelevance based on the way that they're operating and the kind of working practices that they're operating under. So it adds a lot of complexity to organizations. How do we actually work out how many contractors we've got? It's called a hidden headcount or rogue spend. What skills do we have? How are they providing services? Where are they providing services from? And what compliance risk does that present to us? Labor supply, all supply chain scrutiny is pretty much increasing, right? On across a lot of different subjects, not just with labor supply, but labor supply is a big issue globally. Organizations are being pushed to start to take more responsibility for what data and information and oversight they have about how labor is being supplied to them.
I was talking to a procurement leader recently as part of a research efforts, and we had talked to several different HR and talent leaders, things like that. But we brought in one procurement person just to hear their perspective on things. And it was pretty dramatic to hear her saying, no, listen, here's how we look at things. And we're adding this layer of scrutiny, to use the word you used a minute ago. We're adding this layer of difficulty essentially for all their suppliers. And she said, we're trying to make these things clear because at the end of the day, we are responsible if this is messed up. We don't do it right. We're the ones on the hook. So we've got to really do our due diligence and get that out there. So she was talking about those things. You mentioned the term rogue spend a minute ago. And one of the stories that always pops in my head when I hear that term is we had a manager years ago in another country, and he had this expense that was on his expense report every single month. I'm like, what is this thing? So I reached out to him and said, hey, what is this? We're trying to, my friends over in accounting. He said, oh, that's Maria. So what do you mean, Maria? He said, she works with us and I pay her in cash. And then I just do expense reimbursement. I said, is Maria working in the building? Oh yeah, she should be on payroll then. And you're creating all this risk for us and just trying to make it easy for you. He said, oh, I don't know if he knew for sure. I think he really did and just wanted to avoid all those things. But the rogue spend, that's a picture I have in my head of sometimes it's that overt, sometimes it's accidental, right? Yeah. Not knowing those things. Or as you mentioned, there's amendments to a contract and suddenly that person edges over from, hey, listen, before they were a contractor, but now we have so much control over their work. Now they should be technically an employee, and we don't catch it because it wasn't in the original, which had all the scrutiny and everything else. It just was an amendment that sort of slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And what you said about sometimes it being accidental, sometimes it being, I guess, semi-accidental. They're doing it. They don't know exactly the ins and outs why, but I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I need to get the job done. And I think that's an really important consideration, because one thing we find is that there's sensitivity around it. You might have people, you've got line managers and they're under pressure to deliver. And when you go and have something like a headcount freeze, where you can't hire a contractor you need to hire, or you can't hire the perm person you need to hire, all of a sudden you start thinking, what about the services route? Can someone come through under a services agreement? I've got budget there. Let's bring someone in under that. And these guys are under pressure to get the job done. So they do what they need to do to get the job done. They know they're not doing it right. But what they don't realize is, if that's happening regularly in an organization, that risk compounds over years. And before you know it, it's a mess. And you're not just looking at tax risk. And I think one thing we spoke about in Paris was, there's the commercial considerations as well. What are we paying these people? How much are we paying them? How much more are we paying them? And if they've gone through the correct channel? Have we got a whole bunch of additional skills sitting across services that are all under these kind of time and material, like rogue spend type agreements, that actually is burning a bit of a hole in our pocket? And if we don't have that total workforce view across all channels, we can't make the best strategic decisions and can't make the best sort of financially efficient decisions. So it's a really broad topic. And I think one thing, as our customer base matures and they start off doing we need to deal with the classification risk, and they start to see the information that comes out of that process, all of a sudden they're like, actually, we've got a much better view of our total workforce now, just through going through this classification exercise. We see exactly what's going on as part of the discovery, and they can make much better decisions. And I could tell you a whole bunch of other stories uncovering when in really big organizations, whether it be enterprise or a public sort of sector body or institution, where the rigor can be really messy. People leaving a permanent job on, say, $60,000 on the Friday and coming back on the Monday as a contractor on $1,000 a day, $2,000 a day, that kind of stuff. And believe it or not, people don't notice, because they're sometimes coming through like a corporation or a limited company that kind of disguises the person behind it. And they don't really realize they're doing something wrong. They know they're getting away with it. It's pretty cute, but they don't realize the compliance risk that they're putting on the organization by doing that. And that's really common. Or they come back through a service provider, they leave and come back through a service provider, a consultancy or something, and on a massive margin. Hey, this person was here on Friday doing the same job and costing us much less. So you see all sorts come out.
The thing is that, again, that sort of thing, the person that helps to approve that from a procurement perspective or has a perspective on that, they may not know that person wasn't employed, because those systems don't talk to each other. They're not connected. And so for so many organizations we speak with in our research, listen, talent acquisition has little visibility in many companies into the contingent spend, what's happening on that front. And that's at a business unit level or something else. And so because of that, that's creating problems, but they're already busy enough. How do we solve for those sorts of things? That's why I think tools like this help to create a better picture, so everyone's on the same page. No one gets surprised by those sorts of things. You're talking about some of these organizations, those sorts of things like that, and how managers are pressured to perform and make sure at the end of the day, that's what they're going to be rewarded for or not. That's where the incentive is. And so there was this, I read it back in business school, this on the folly of hoping for A while rewarding B. We hope for compliance, A, but we're rewarding them for results, B. And so they will find a workaround. They will find a way to get there because we are incentivizing them to do that. And we're not incentivizing them to make sure they're staying compliant. There's no bonus for not getting in trouble legally. It's just the negative side. There's no carrot. It's only a stick. So it's hard for those leaders. It's hard to fault them in some cases. But at the same time, we've got to make sure these things are clear.
You're absolutely right. And I think an important part of this process is sometimes when you first speak to people about the process and the diligence that needs to be put in place, line managers it's a bit of change management needed, because line managers sort of panic. Oh God, they're going to tell me that I can't use this contractor that's been really helping me on this project. What if they put on? And that's definitely not the idea. And I spoke to a chief procurement officer a few weeks ago. They've been running procurement in a very big global bank for many years. And he said to me, from his perspective, if they're using a specialist resource, is delivering a lot of value, and they're paying, say they're paying someone, and I'm talking sort of high-level professional services, 1,500 quid a day or £2,000 a day, and they're coming through a service provider or whatever, and they really should be an identified contingent worker. They should be going through an MSP program or a contingent program. The price wouldn't be that high because they've got all these kind of levers that they pull to show what they're paying, all these brackets. They'd go to market and do a full analysis, etc. But the line manager has gone out and wants to identify this person. They bring them under a services agreement. He doesn't want to pull that person off the project. He knows that they're delivering value, and actually the cost of them being pulled off is a big problem. And he doesn't mind if he's paying a bit more than he should to get that done. But he does want them to be compliant. Right? He doesn't want non-compliance. He doesn't want a lack of visibility. And I think that education piece sometimes with the line managers is a careful line to tread to say, unless we see you going out and hiring 10, 20 people that are all 50% higher than they should be charged, we're probably not going to do very much. We might mature you to a bit of a better model, an efficient model over a period of time, but we're not going to start pulling resources off projects and programs. But what we do want to make sure, first course, is that they're compliant and we know about them, because that's pretty critical.
So one of the things that you and I have not discussed yet in this conversation, but we talked about a lot when I saw you face to face, was around the AI component. This tool has that built in to help keep tabs on what's happening, what's updating, what's changing, as a way that, again, no human probably can look across all those contracts and possibly keep them all in their head, know what's changed between this one and that one, all those sorts of things. Talk about how the AI fits into this picture, what sort of things it does, and how it helps to lower risk.
So what we will do as an organization is we've got a technology platform that's self-serve, but we have a level of human oversight. It can be used by the expertise with the client. We'll analyze things like the contracts, the statements of work, the working practices, regulations, and we compare all that as a first stage audit, so we can start to identify what types of agreements and contracts are in place and start to look at where the risks are. And then as that process goes through, you start to identify and understand more about the workers that are providing services under these agreements, especially the ones that are operating in a manner that, and I use the term time and materials or not, and it's a bit unfair because some time materials contracts are very genuine contracts without services, but that's typically a bit of a sign where you see there's no milestones and things in the contract, and it's just, we're just paying for labor basically. And that's very nuanced and fairly complex, but the initial sort of scan that we'll do through those documents is incredibly fast. It takes minutes to do quite a significant volume. And you start to generate a bit of a report and an overview of things like contract strength, number of workers potentially, the rates being paid, the low rate, the high rate, the mid rate, the location, are there dependencies in the contracts, are there risks in the contracts? So we do this kind of audit of purchase services. And then from there, we'll start to agree what the next steps look like. So then you can start to say, these are the higher risk ones. We need to go and get some more information on them. We might need to classify all these workers or do other compliance checks. You mentioned things like access to buildings, laptops, all those bits as well. So all of a sudden, you're creating this, as I said, this workforce view and starting to be able to mature the organization controls around them from a compliance and commercial perspective. So that's the general concept. And then you can manage the workers however you need to, once they've been identified and all the compliance checks have been done.
My background as an HR leader was in government contracting. So we had all government contracts. And one of the things that you started talking about there was the different types of contract. In my head, I'm like, HR doesn't always get exposed to that. But usually it's, hey, here's the fixed fee for the service. That's what HR typically sees. But there's all these different types, right? There's labor materials, there's cost plus, there's indefinite delivery. And that's sort of like, this is open-ended and it may never end or we don't know. And so all those the variety there is what really creates risk for me in my head, because these organizations don't always know what that total cap could be or whatever else. They don't know what all those variables and don't have a way to see that. So that's what excited me, hearing about the AI component, being able to look into and understand and give us a better picture of what's happening there. As I said earlier, also that sort of ongoing, hey, this contract may now have crossed over into this person has too much oversight, or they're using the company's materials or whatever other checks. Again, I'm not a lawyer either, but starts to edge them over into maybe they should be an employee, or maybe this other type of contract setup would be more beneficial for the company because it will reduce the cost, but would still keep that person on a retainer, whatever else. Like just being able to have another sounding board in there. It's like a super procurement expert, basically looking over each of these versus a busy team that's already stressed out and overworked, trying to keep all that together. for most of the procurement teams I talk to, they're just trying to keep up with the stuff incoming. There's no chance they could look at all the stuff that's already on the books, trying to manage that and keep tabs on it with any sort of regularity or completeness, right? Spot checking maybe, but not on an ongoing basis. Just too much to keep up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And the spot checks are an absolutely critical part of this. The trigger points there are really critical because things change from when the contract is originally signed. And depending on what systems you've got in place, it might be that new POs or new requests are constantly made against the same supplier that was supposed to have a really short engagement. And those type of engagements can start to be looked at as why we continue extending this. Is there an overspend going on here? Is it through non-delivery? Is it through poor supplier performance? And you can really start to build a picture. And then you come to the compliance piece, which is like if there's constant extensions from a contractor, that's likely to require checking and likely to need to be looked at, that they're not morphing into an employee. And depending on what system you've got in place, as I said, if you've got like a VMS in place, those trigger points are really easy to have built in. So we need to do a reassessment here, or after there's a certain number of trigger points or extensions, you start to really have to look again at that classification and start to see if the service is changing and start seeing if it's the most efficient spend for your organization.
You're talking about efficiency here, and I'm going to come back around to what you started off with. There's two big use cases for something like this. Number one, it's reducing risk, right? Accurate classification, making sure we're on the right page, making sure we don't accidentally make the wrong choice. But the second part you talked about was being able to see this workforce, contractors, freelancers, right, people under an MSA, all these sorts of ways we access talent that are not employees, and having visibility into that. You talk about those two sorts of things. So what are your thoughts on that? When you're talking to an employer, do you really lean on one or the other? It's got to be both of those sorts of things. And yeah, we'll start with compliance, sure. But then let's look at these things over time because you start to see that visibility. Talk about that sort of evolution, because it feels like the first part may be more of a hot button issue. But once you've solved for that a little bit, or at least mitigates that risk, you start to see the opportunity for the value that it brings to see that broader population of non-employee talent, that extended workforce you're working with. Is that fair?
Ben, you've just taken the words out of my mouth. I don't think
I can thunder, Michael.
Exactly what you said. So the hot issue for the vast majority of companies that we work with is the classification compliance, and being able to do that in multiple jurisdictions and do it properly and do it in detail and have it managed and provide confidence. By default, you start to get so much more information out of that process. And then the evolution of that over time is, actually, did you know we were paying for this? Actually, did you know we've got a team of 5 DevOps engineers or 5 doctors in healthcare that are constantly on site, and they've been on site the whole time? We're paying for a service provider, we're paying these rates, and all of a sudden all this picture starts to form. And then it starts becoming a really interesting strategic position for the organization when it comes to their sort of total workforce view, which is a sort of a term I hear mentioned quite commonly, is that, are we optimizing our workforce in the best possible way?
I had this thought early in my career. I was working for a company that built these big machines, and we had engineers, everybody else on staff, people in the shop building these things physically. And every other week we were on a payroll. And I realized, like, hey, there's this guy out there, and I don't think we've got him a paycheck in like the 2 months I've been here. What's going on? I said, oh, he's one of our contractors. Oh, really? But he's here every day. Yeah, he's here. He works 40 hours. He works here on site. He uses all our stuff. And he's a friend of the owner. I'm like, okay. So why not just become an employee? Because he can make more if he doesn't. Yeah. And it was just one of those things where I remember very early in my career, I forgot that story until just now, but hey, he works with the owner, they're buddies, they go way back, and he doesn't want to be an employee, so we don't make him be. And It was that moment where I realized, okay, there are people that are just going to find other ways to get around the system. And this sort of thing for me is intriguing because, like you were talking about, this gets to strategy, this gets to optimization, this gets to using our resources in the best way. And every leader out there, again, what we're rewarding, what we're incentivizing, we should be leaning on, are we using our resources in the wisest way? Not just, can you get by with that? Not just, can you make that go and someone's not going to find out, but is this the best use of the resources? Because if not, there may be a better way to approach it. And so I've loved getting those insights from you in this conversation today. If someone wants to hear more about CoComply, know more about what you and the team are up to and how you're helping companies solve for some of these things, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Find me on LinkedIn, Michael Cleavely, or michael@cocomply.co.uk on email. And yeah, drop me a note. I'll gladly jump on a call with anyone that wants to talk around what we do, what challenges they're facing, and try to give them some insights or a good starting point and take things from there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you again, Michael, for spending some time to get today with me. I've enjoyed it, really diving into this. And again, anyone who knows me and my work knows that compliance isn't the thing I love spending time on, but today I've really enjoyed it. I think it's because we're getting past that, just the negative side, and getting to the positive, the value, the insights and strategy that are built around that and helping us to get to that piece of it. So thank you again for joining us.
No problem at all. I'm glad it's been useful. Thanks, Ben.
Absolutely. To everybody else out there, stay compliant. Make sure you're following some of these things. I hope you give CoComply a look, because I was impressed with what they're doing. And we'll catch you again next time on We're Only Human. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I'm honored to have you as a listener. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 10 seconds to rate it at iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you know a friend that could benefit from today's conversation, please pass it their way. After all, a rising tide lifts all ships. To see show notes, sponsor information, and our full show archives, visit onlyhumanshow.com.